Hi there, it's Joe. Welcome back to A Rock Till We Drop. Today I have my story about tough times, resilience, and learning to ask, how can I, instead of I can't. Sometimes life nudges you towards a new idea, a different way of living, or a change you can't quite name yet. If you're feeling that nudge, maybe this story will give you the courage to take your first step. We had a leap into the unknown back in the early 90s. After 3 years travelling around Australia, my husband and I bought a house in the Marlborough Sounds. We bought it the same day we saw it. No plan, no jobs lined up, just a feeling that this was where we are meant to be. The nearest town was too far to commute for work, so we both took jobs at a local mussel factory. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a career-building ladder. It was simply what we had to do to survive. And that's the first lesson tough times teach you. Sometimes you take the job you don't want, so you can build the life you do want. The factory that taught me everything. People assume the mussel factory was the worst job I'd ever had. But here's the truth. It taught me more about people, resilience, and real teamwork than any other proper job I've ever had. We all wore the same clothes. We smelt like mussels. We all earned the same money. No one thought they were better than anyone else. And break times was always great fun. We had lots of laughter, nice food to eat, and we used to buoy each other along. If anyone got negative, the others soon lifted them up. We were equals. We were a team. Years later, when I finally landed what everyone called the good job in administration, I thought I'd made it, hit the big time. A desk, a title, fancy clothes. And you know what? Boom, boom. It was the worst environment I'd ever been in. Bullying, egos, office politics, people acting important just because they've got a job title. I'd never felt smaller or more miserable in my work, but I was determined to leave when it suited me. And that's when I learned something I carried into every job after that, especially my job when I worked as an employment mentor. A job status means nothing. How it makes you feel means everything. And sometimes the worst job is the one that shapes you the most. A simple idea that helped us get by when money was tight back then. I mean, money was really tight in those early years. When money is tight, you start thinking differently. We noticed that the factory workers struggled to find accommodation. Actually, what's new, same thing today, isn't it? So we rented them out at the local motor camp. We had no internet, no templates, no systems, just handwritten agreements and a willingness to try something new. It wasn't a business yet, just a small idea to help make ends meet. But it planted a seed, and that seed grew into something much bigger later. But that's a story for another video. Around this time, I became pregnant, and we kept it quiet. I was just getting bigger uniforms as the winter came on. One day during a breakdown at the factory, Rod walked over and said to the ladies, "Have you noticed how fat my wife is?" They were horrified until they realised I was pregnant. That was my 5-month announcement. I worked right up until the week before our son arrived. There was no paid leave back then. You just kept going until you couldn't. The day before he was born, he did actually come a week early, we were out fishing and hunting in the Sounds. On the way home, it was rather bumpy, and we cooked snapper for dinner, and I went into labour. But first, we had to bring the boat in, load it on a trailer, sort out the wild boar that we had hanging up. We even had to wrap the pig up in plastic so we could drop it off in town on our way to the hospital. You have to get your priorities. It was a circus. After a long labour, the doctor arrived straight off her bike, helmet and all, and delivered our son with forceps. No wonder he loves biking. It's his first view of the world. Life on one wage in those early years home with baby was not easy. I stayed home for 3.5 years while Rod worked the night shift. Money was tight and every dollar mattered. Pretty much everything we bought back then was secondhand. Even cloth nappies. Can you believe it? We didn't really have disposables then, and if we did, we couldn't afford it. But that's what you do when you're young, you're broke, and you're trying to make life work. There wasn't enough money for clothes and toys, so I started going to town on Saturday mornings to go to the garage sales. I loved it. We always felt rich, even though we were spending very little. And funny enough, we still love going to the garage sales. We still live like that today, saving on the small things so we can afford the big things that matter. And for now, for us, that's travel. Between the caravans, the possum skins, the wild pork, the fish, and the vegetables from the garden, we found ways to survive. Back then, there was no overdraft. If you didn't have the money, you put things back. I used to go to the supermarket with a calculator, adding everything up as I went. And now, every time I walk through the supermarket without one, I feel rich. Not because I am rich, but because I can remember what it felt like to have nothing and be so careful with our money. Because Rod was working nights and I was home with the baby, the quickest way for him to get to work was by boat. But climbing in and out of the boat from a muddy rope mooring was a mission, especially in the dark, in the rain, and with lots of gear and gumboots. It was just awful. So we decided to build a jetty, just like that. We weren't builders. We didn't know how to build a jetty, but we knew we needed one. When our baby was 2 months old, the factory shut down for 2 months due to an algae bloom. That was a shock. No work. At the same time, a friend needed some trees logged on his land. We made a deal. We'd cut the trees and he'd supply the timber for our jetty, treated and ready to go in the water. So we moved into a shack on his property, way out the Sounds, very remote. Dirt floor, no power, a loft upstairs, and a tiny baby. It was basic, but it was an opportunity. Rod blasted holes with gelignite for the poles of the jetty. I held each pole steady with a baby on my back while he levelled it and secured it with stays. That's what we do. We mix concrete by hand in a wheelbarrow. The 4 poles that were in the water permanently were put in by barge, but the rest we did ourselves. And because our son was little and full of energy, we even built low rails along the sides of the jetty so he wouldn't run or fall off. I've never seen rails on a jetty before or since, but that's what you do when you're young parents, making it up as you go. It still makes me laugh to this day. It took over a year working around Rod's night shifts and me being home full-time with the baby. But we built that jetty, and it's still standing today and looks awesome. Every time we walk down that jetty, we are reminded you don't need perfect conditions. Life was tough, but we were young, determined, full of energy. And we learned something that shaped our decision, our every decision after that. When money is tight, you don't say, I can't afford it. You say, how can I afford it? Suddenly the world opens up to you. That mindset carried us through every tough season that came after. And we've had a few of them, believe me. So, if you're sitting there wondering about a new idea, a business, a project, a different way of life, I hope this story shows you that you don't need perfect conditions. You don't need money. You don't need a plan. You don't need confidence. You just need to start and ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? If you can face that, then do it. Because if we could do it with no skills, no money, no roadmap, you can do it too. Just start. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you in my next video. Ciao for now.